Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving deep into a really pivotal period in human development, middle childhood. I
Right.
think roughly ages 6 to 12.
Yeah.
This is a time when kids are taking, huge steps into the world outside their immediate family
hmm Building complex social lives.
and really beginning that journey of figuring out who they are as individuals.
It's a period of really rapid change, both internally and externally. Our source material for this deep dive, well, it offers a rich exploration of the research on this crucial stage, gives us a kind of roadmap.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack the most important insights from that material. We want to highlight what's surprising, maybe what challenges some common assumptions, and crucially, how this knowledge is relevant to you.
Definitely. Whether you're a parent sort of navigating these years or an educator seeing it firsthand or, just someone fascinated by how we develop,
Yeah.
there's a lot here that should resonate, offer some new perspectives.
We're going to explore the big shifts in how children see themselves, how their friendships evolve, which is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
We'll tackle major challenges like bullying and look at the incredibly varied family environments kids are growing up in today.
A lot to cover.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start with the inner world. The sources really emphasize that during these middle childhood years, kids are intensely focused on that question, who am I?
That foundational question really does take center stage. And what's fascinating, I think, is the shift in how they answer it. Think about a younger child. They might describe themselves using really external things.
Like what?
Oh, I'm fast, or I have a blue bike. Maybe I live in a big house.
Right, very concrete, observable stuff.
Precisely. But in middle childhood, their self-understanding moves inward. It becomes more psychological.
So less about what they have and more about who they are.
Exactly. They start defining themselves by internal traits. So they'll say things like, I'm good at math, or I'm kind to my friends, or even acknowledging things like, I get worried sometimes. Their view of themselves just becomes less simplistic, much more complex.
Covering personality, abilities, feelings.
All of it, yeah.
This really connects with Erik Erikson's view, doesn't it? He calls this the
Industry versus inferiority stage.
right, industry versus inferiority.
He does. And for Erikson, this entire period, roughly 6 to 12, it's fundamentally about developing a sense of competence.
Competence.
Yeah. It's about mastering new challenges, whether that's at school, on the playground, in activities. It's through that effort, through accomplishment, that they build this sense of being capable, of being, industrious.
So succeeding and mastering those things builds feelings of proficiency, of mastery, like a strong foundation.
Yes, it fosters that crucial sense of, I can do this.
And the flip side.
Well, conversely, repeated difficulties or failures during this time, especially without good support, that can lead to feelings of failure and inadequacy. That's the inferiority side of Erikson's equation. It really highlights just how vital opportunities for success and positive feedback are during these years.
Okay. Now, while they're looking inward, they're also constantly looking outward, aren't they? The sources talk a lot about social comparison kicking in.
Oh, they do. And this is a natural human tendency, but it really ramps up in middle childhood. Social comparison is, basically evaluating your own behavior, your abilities, your opinions by comparing yourself to others.
Like, am I as good at reading as she is?
Yeah.
Or do the other kids think I'm funny?
Exactly those kinds of questions.
And Leon Festinger had this idea.
Where?
What was it? About social reality.
Yeah, Festinger argued that when there isn't an objective way to measure something like how popular am I, or am I a good friend, things like that, people turn to social reality. It's the understanding we get from watching how others act, think, and feel. So kids aren't just comparing internal traits, they're using the social world, like a mirror, to figure out where they stand. What others say and do becomes a kind of truth about themselves.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, I thought. The sources mention downward social comparison. That sounds a bit negative.
It can sound that way, but it's also a kind of coping mechanism. While children usually compare themselves to peers who are similar, the material points out that when their self-esteem feels threatened, they might strategically, maybe unconsciously, compare themselves to those who are less competent or successful.
So instead of looking at the kid who aces every test, they might glance over at someone who's struggling, just to feel a bit better about their own B-.
Precisely. It's a way to protect or maybe boost their self-view in that moment. It shows how active and, strategic kids can be in managing their own sense of worth.
And that leads us directly to self-esteem, which the sources say develops significantly during middle childhood.
Absolutely. Self-esteem, that overall positive or negative evaluation a person has of themselves. What's key during these years is that it becomes much more nuanced, more differentiated.
Hmm.
Meaning a child might have really high self-esteem about their soccer skills, but maybe lower self-esteem when it comes to, say, math class. It's not just one global feeling anymore.
Got it. And the research generally indicates that overall self-esteem actually increases during middle childhood.
It does, generally, though there might be a brief dip, the sources mention, maybe around age 12, possibly tied to the shifts coming with adolescence.
Right. But this raises an important point.
Yeah.
What about kids who struggle with chronically low self-esteem?
Yeah, the sources highlight that this can be a real problem. They can get caught in this difficult cycle of failure.
How so?
Well, low self-worth might make them less likely to try new things or persist when things get tough,
Hmm.
which can lead to more failures, which then reinforces that negative self-view. It's a tough loop.
That sounds incredibly challenging. What does the source material suggest parents can do? How can they help break that cycle, maybe promote healthier self-esteem?
Well, the material mentions authoritative parenting specifically.
Okay, define that again.
That's the style that balances warmth and responsiveness with clear expectations and reasonable limits. Support, but also structure.
Hmm.
That approach seems particularly effective in fostering a child's self-esteem. Feeling securely attached, having boundaries, but also getting encouragement. That seems key.
There's also a fascinating detail, I thought, about race and self-esteem mentioned in the sources.
Yes, the research points out something interesting. While white children might initially show higher self-esteem than black children in early middle childhood, something shifts around age 11. Black children actually begin to show slightly higher self-esteem on average.
Wow, that's quite a shift. Is it understood why?
Well, the material notes these differences have narrowed over time compared to older research. And social identity theory is suggested as one possible explanation. As children become more aware of their group identity, being part of a minority group might, in complex ways, sometimes foster a stronger sense of identity and self-worth.
Interesting. And another finding related to groups immigrant children in the U.S.
Right. The sources note they often have better school grades and similar levels of self-esteem compared to their non-immigrant peers.
Even though their parents might face more challenges.
Yes, despite parents frequently being in, less educated, lower-paying jobs, maybe with less access to healthcare, the material suggests this is partly due to a strong culturally based motivation to succeed that many immigrant families bring. It's a powerful reminder that external circumstances don't always dictate a child's internal drive.
Okay, so moving from that inner world to the social sphere. Friendships undergo some truly profound changes in middle childhood.
They really do. They shift from just being about, who lives nearby or who has the same toys,
Yeah.
to something much deeper. William Damon's Stages of Friendship Development offer a great way to think about this evolution.
Okay, walk us through those. Stage 1, early on.
Stage 1 is basing friendship on others' behaviors. Very concrete. It's all about who shares, who's fun to play tag with, who doesn't hit. But then, right in the heart of middle childhood, we see this shift to Stage 2. Here, friendship is based on trust.
Your trust becomes central.
Absolutely. Mutual trust is the centerpiece. Friends are kids you can rely on, who won't spill your secrets, who stick up for now.
And then later, Stage 3.
Stage 3, moving more towards adolescence, is basing friendship on psychological closeness. Things like loyalty, intimacy, really understanding each other on a deeper level.
It's quite a journey, from just playmates to real confidants.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is how these changing views of friendship tie into the social dynamics of the peer group, especially popularity.
Right, so sources give us a picture of what popular kids are often like. They tend to have more friends.
And often hang out with other popular kids.
Right. And they're described often as helpful, cooperative, funny, good at reading social cues.
Generally positive traits, yeah. While less popular children often tend to have friends who are also less popular, it seems like popularity kind of creates its own social orbits.
But there's that surprising detail mentioned in the material about a subset of popular boys.
Ah, yes. The research indicates that for some boys, displaying certain negative behaviors, maybe being a bit aggressive or defiant, doesn't actually hurt their popularity.
It might even enhance it.
In some peer groups, yes. They might be seen as cool or tough, It highlights that popularity isn't solely based on being, conventionally nice.
And this connects to the idea of social competence.
Yeah.
Popular kids tend to be high in this.
That's right. Social competence is basically that collection of social skills you need to navigate social situations successfully.
Like what kind of skill?
Yeah. Understanding social cues, knowing how to join a group smoothly, resolving minor conflicts without making things worse, keeping conversations going, things like that. Popular kids generally have these skills, which helps them build and keep relationships.
Okay. And this leads us to social problem solving.
Which is really about using strategies to handle social conflict or tricky situations in ways that work out okay for everyone involved, or at least for yourself, without causing too much trouble. Researchers like Dodge view it as involving steps like accurately reading the situation, thinking up different ways to respond, and then picking the best one.
And there's a clear link between these skills and popularity, too.
Absolutely. Popular children are generally better at accurately interpreting others' behavior and intentions.
Like if someone bumps into them.
Exactly. They're less likely to immediately assume it was hostile. They might think, oh, it was an accident. This helps them respond more effectively.
Whereas unpopular kids,
Well, sometimes, perhaps due to negative past experiences, they might develop a kind of learned helplessness in social settings. They might expect negative outcomes or misinterpret neutral cues as hostile.
but the good news, embedded in the source material, is that social confidence isn't fixed. It can be taught.
Yes, absolutely. There are programs designed specifically to teach kids social skills.
Like what?
Things like active listening, how to read nonverbal cues, how to start conversations, join activities appropriately. And the sources say the outcomes can be really positive. More interaction with peers, higher self-esteem, greater acceptance.
Any practical tips mentioned?
Yes, one interesting one for schools is that avoiding things like public team picking or group selection can significantly help protect the feelings of less popular kids. A small change, but potentially impactful.
Good point. Another big factor shaping friendships during this time is gender.
Oh, hugely. Gender segregation in friendships is incredibly common during middle childhood. You see it in almost all societies studied. Boys tend to play with boys, girls with girls.
And the sources point out differences in how they interact within those groups.
Yeah, and interesting differences in their interactions and even their language. Boys' interactions often reflect a concern with status, navigating a kind of dominance hierarchy.
So more challenging, maybe joking about who's tougher.
Sometimes, yeah. Asserting their place. Girls' interactions, while definitely not conflict-free, tend to reflect a focus on connection and intimacy. Their language is often less directly confrontational.
Race also plays a role in who kids become friends with.
It does. The material indicates that children's closest friendships during this period are largely with others of the same race.
But it's not total separation.
No, and this is a really positive finding noted in the sources. While closest friends might be same race, children can show a high degree of mutual acceptance and positive feelings towards peers from other racial groups.
And contact helps.
Yes, contact between majority and minority group members is specifically highlighted as something that can help reduce prejudice and discrimination. It really underscores the importance of diverse schools and communities.
Okay, transitioning from the peer world, let's look at some significant challenges kids might face, like bullying.
Bullying is a serious issue, unfortunately common during middle childhood. The statistics in the source material are quite sobering. Around 70% of young people report witnessing bullying in school.
70% witness it.
Yeah, and nearly half, 49%, of students in grades 4 through 12 report actually being bullied monthly.
Wow. And the types are varied, right? Verbal, physical.
Right. Verbal insults, physical aggression, relational bullying, that's things like spreading rumors, exclusion, and of course, increasingly, cyberbullying.
What does the research tell us about the kids involved? Who tends to get bullied?
Children who are bullied are often perceived by others as being different in some way. Maybe it's their weight, maybe they're new to the school, maybe it's about sexual orientation or family income. They're often described as being perhaps more isolated, maybe passive, sometimes lacking the social skills to effectively deflect or respond to the bullying.
And the kids who do the bullying. What does the source material say about them?
Well, the source notes that about half of children who bully come from homes where there's been abuse or neglect.
But half don't.
Right. It's crucial to remember that the other half do not. Bullies tend to watch more violent media. They're more prone to misbehave in general, often show little remorse. And the research shows they're unfortunately more likely to break the law as adults.
And some are victims themselves.
Yes, interestingly and sadly, the material also notes that some children who bully are also victims of bullying themselves. It can be a complex dynamic.
So given how widespread and harmful it is, what does the source material say actually works to reduce bullying?
School-wide programs are highlighted as being effective, particularly those that involve the students themselves and focus on changing the overall school climate, making it less tolerant of bullying behavior.
And empowering bystanders.
Yes, empowering the peer group, teaching students how and why to stand up for victims is noted as a really crucial strategy, giving the witnesses the tools and encouragement to intervene safely.
And what does the research suggest is not particularly effective? What doesn't work so well?
The source is pretty clear on this. It explicitly mentions that things like zero-tolerance policies for fighting and also grouping troubled students together, like in special therapy groups or separate classrooms, have not been shown to be effective in actually reducing bullying overall.
That's a really key insight. So it's less about punishment or isolation.
And more about changing the broader social context and empowering the whole community, especially the bystanders.
Okay. As kids navigate these social challenges, the home environment is also changing as they gain more independence.
Definitely. This period is often characterized by something called co-regulation.
Co-regulation.
Yeah, it's where parents and children start to jointly control the child's behavior. It's a shift.
Less direct moment-to-moment supervision.
Exactly. Parents provide more general oversight, while children are trusted to manage more of their own day-to-day activities and choices.
So maybe parents aren't standing over them, watching homework get done, but they're checking in later, making sure it happened.
That's a good example. And as kids spend more time in school activities with friends, the material points out that the sheer amount of time spent with parents often decreases during middle childhood.
And siblings.
Yeah.
Still a big influence.
Oh, absolutely. Siblings continue to play a really significant role providing companionship, support, but also potentially conflict. Sibling rivalry is definitely a common dynamic during these years.
The sources also take a good look at the incredibly diverse family structures kids are growing up in today. Let's touch on some of those. What about working parents? Both parents working full-time.
Yeah, the research indicates that in most cases, children whose parents both work full-time outside the home actually fare quite well.
Really?
Yes. The key factor linked to good adjustment here isn't so much that the parents are working, but rather the psychological adjustment and well-being of the parents themselves, especially the mother, according to the source material. Stress levels, satisfaction, those things matter.
Okay. And what about kids who are home alone after school for a bit? The sources call them self-care children.
Right. Previously sometimes called latchkey kids. These are children who manage themselves for a period after school until a parent gets home.
And the finding here is...
Kind of surprising, perhaps. Being a self-care child is not necessarily harmful. In fact, the material suggests that for some children, this experience can actually lead to enhanced independence, responsibility, and even a stronger sense of competence.
That definitely challenges some older anxieties about that situation.
It does. And it seems the support structures around the child, knowing a neighbor is available, having clear rules, feeling safe, and the quality of the home environment when parents are present are often more important than just the fact of being in self-care for a limited time.
Okay. The sources cover several other common family structures too. What about the effects of divorce?
Well, the short-term effects of parental divorce can certainly be difficult for children. You might see increased anxiety, maybe some behavioral issues right around the time of the separation.
The long term.
The longer-term consequences are less clear-cut. They seem heavily influenced by other factors, like the family's economic stability after the divorce. That matters a lot. And, crucially, whether the divorce actually reduces significant hostility or conflict that existed in the marriage. If the fighting stops, that can actually be a positive outcome for kids' well-being, even with the divorce.
Makes sense. Single-parent families are very common now.
They are. The material notes about 31% of U.S. children under 18 live with a single parent. And again, the ultimate consequences for children in these families seem tied less to the structure itself and more to factors like economic status, how much time the parent has available, and the overall level of stress in the household.
We also see grandparents stepping into primary caregiving roles more often.
Yes. Nearly 3 million U.S. households have grandparents serving as the primary caretakers for their grandchildren. Sources note that grandparents with lower income and education levels and those belonging to minority groups are statistically more likely to find themselves in this vital role.
And multi-generational families.
Yeah.
Living with parents and grandparents, perhaps.
Right. The material points out that about 1 in 5 U.S. citizens live in a household with multiple generations. These families can offer a really rich living experience, lots of support, but there's also potential for conflict, especially if multiple adults are trying to act as disciplinarians without really clear coordination or agreement on rules.
Then there are blended families when parents remarry.
Defined as a remarried couple where there's at least one stepchild living in the home. The material notes that role ambiguity, who's responsible for what discipline, what's the step-parent's role exactly, that can be a challenge initially.
But kids adjust.
Often surprisingly well, especially school-age kids. The sources suggest that supporting the child's self-esteem through the transition and actively working to foster a sense of family togetherness really helps smooth the adjustment.
Okay, and finally, children with gay, lesbian, and transgender parents. What does the research say?
The sources estimate around 6 million children in the U.S. have same-sex parents. There's a growing body of research now, and it consistently indicates that children raised in these families develop similarly across a wide range of outcomes: psychological adjustment, peer relationships, school performance compared to kids raised by heterosexual parents.
And their own orientation.
The research also clearly indicates a child's sexual orientation is unrelated to the sexual orientation or gender identity of their parents.
Got it. The sources also touch briefly on how factors like race and poverty interact with family life during this period.
Yes, the material notes some broad cultural themes observed in research across different racial groups. For instance, Black families often emphasizing support for extended family members, Latinx families stressing the central importance of family life, familismo, and some Asian American family structures sometimes having a cultural pattern where the father holds significant authority and maintains discipline.
But these are broad patterns, not rules for every family.
Exactly. They're patterns noted in research, important context, but absolutely not universal stereotypes. Individual families vary immensely within any group.
And the significant risks associated with poverty are highlighted too.
Yes, very clearly. Children growing up in economically disadvantaged circumstances are at higher risk for poorer academic performance and also increased rates of aggression or conduct problems. Declines in a family's economic well-being are specifically linked to mental health problems in children. It just reinforces how fundamental economic stability is for child well-being, regardless of the specific family structure.
Finally, the sources look at group care, like foster care, in the modern context.
All right. The good news is the number of children in formal group care or foster care has actually decreased over the last decade.
But still a lot of kids.
Still a lot. Over 440,000 children are in foster care in the U.S. And the primary reason for placement in about 3/4 of cases is because they've been victims of neglect and abuse.
There seems to be some societal debate around group care mentioned.
Yes. The source highlights this ongoing debate. It notes that some public figures or politicians suggest increasing the use of group homes or residential care as a solution for vulnerable children. However, many social service professionals and psychological experts are often more cautious. They raise concerns about ensuring consistent emotional support, attachment, and love for children in group settings, as well as the significant financial costs involved.
But it's not entirely negative.
No. The material also includes the perspective that for some children, under certain circumstances, group care can be a positive and safer alternative to their previous situation. So it's presented as a complex issue with different valid viewpoints.
Okay, so if we try to pull this all together, what's the big picture here?
Well, we've taken a deep dive into this period where children are, simultaneously building a much more complex inner sense of who they are,
Right.
while also intensely navigating the really challenging but vital social world of peers and friendships.
And facing tough issues like bullying.
Exactly. And doing all of this within this incredibly diverse landscape of modern family structures we've just discussed.
So this period, middle childhood, is just absolutely crucial for developing that core sense of competence Erikson talked about. Refining social skills, and really beginning to understand their place in the wider world.
And it's shaped so powerfully by both those internal psychological shifts and their external environments, their friends, their school, their family.
Understanding these dynamics, hopefully, gives us profound insight into the children around us.
Mm.
It provides context for how we can best support their healthy development.
Definitely. And maybe, it offers a moment for us to reflect on the experiences that shaped our own paths during those pivotal years.
That brings us to a final thought, drawing from this material. Considering how powerfully things like social comparison and that quest for competence influence a child's self-view during this time, how might our adult interactions, whether we're parents, teachers, coaches, neighbors, how might we be inadvertently reinforcing or maybe challenging these critical developmental processes? Yeah. What does that make you think about the sort of social messages kids are receiving today from the world around them?
That is a question certainly worth pondering.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.